Welcome to episode 7 of Cosmic Motion, an audio program where we discuss motion pictures, good, bad, and ugly, and always interesting throughout the cinematic cosmos. Incidentally, we're recording this on Friday the 13th, December 2024.
Good God.
We will be talking about all kinds of elements of this film and will likely spoil some aspects. Please watch the film first, then come back to our party and join the discussion. I'm Bill. I'm a writer, director, and editor, and I'm here with my buddy
Colin. I'm a television editor by trade.
And this week, our guest is Steve Mitchell. Welcome to him. He's a writer, director, producer. Steve has written various genre films, among them Chopping Mall from '86, which he co-wrote with Jim Wynorski, Against the Law, 1997, starring Nancy Allen, Richard Grieco, and my personal favorite, Jamie Presley, in a small role. And the documentary King Cohen, 2017, about cult writer, director, and producer Larry Cohen. Steve is currently finishing up a documentary about actor Wings Hauser entitled Working Class Actor, which is set to release in 2025. Full disclosure, I edited that movie. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great. Happy to be here with you guys. Let the blabbing begin.
Welcome to the show. Steve is the kind of guy who knows oodles and oodles and oodles about movies. And going back, way back, let's go back to the beginning, Steve. Tell me about a movie that inspired you as a child.
Inspired me as a child. Well, my favorite movie of all time is The Thing from Another World, the Howard Hawks produced and most believe directed science fiction horror classic from the 50s. I absolutely love that picture.
What happened, Doctor?
In the greenhouse, I was working. I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Then a blast of cold air, and I heard Olson scream. When I turned, the thing struck at me.
Go on.
I don't remember my head. I must have fallen. When I came to, I saw Olson and Auerbach. They were...
Give me some more of that. Get those axes. Go ahead, Doctor.
They were both hanging from the beams upside down. They were dead. Their throats were cut.
And when I say that I've seen it about 400 times, I am not kidding.
Holy smokes.
Because growing up in New York City, we used to have a thing called $1 Million Movie, and $1 Million Movie would play one movie a week, like the movie theaters. And they broadcast it, I think, a couple of times a year. So I would watch it 2 or 3 times during the week. I would watch it on the weekend, and they would run it multiple times like a real theater on the weekends. So all those years, I watched all the time, pre-home video, pre-streaming, pre-cable, pre-everything. So they just sort of stacked up, and I watch it regularly. I watch it at least once a year. In a sense, to get to the inspiration part, in terms of my love for movies and my obsession with movies and my desire to work in film and do this kind of storytelling, it kind of started with The Thing.
Wow.
I was interested in making movies because I was obsessed with movies. My dad raised me in an environment where he would say to me, that's going to be on TV tonight. You should watch that. So it was really baked into me. That's what got me interested in movies. And the other thing, for some strange reason, I was a credits junkie. I could watch a movie. I could watch the main titles of a movie I didn't want to watch just to see who made it. And not just the directors or the writers, but the cameramen, the composers, etc.
Well, I think you and Bill have that in common. I always like to joke that Bill can pick out the DP's second cousin twice removed roommate from college.
Yeah.
So it's a skill that I lack. So it's pretty impressive.
It's just, it's repetition. And the other thing is Hollywood in many ways, I think, was a smaller town. And so, and even in television too, I just did a couple of commentary tracks for some old Alfred Hitchcock shows, and you see the actors, and it's almost like a stock company that Hollywood had a stock company. It was a big stock company.
Right.
But today, that doesn't exist. There are a lot of great actors out there today, a lot of people who show up and they bring, schooling and intelligence and a lot of stuff. But in the old days, these stock actors, these character actors, they were almost like shorthand. I remember Billy Friedkin was talking about, and he did commentary for Narrow Margin, which is a very famous RKO noir and a great one. And he's talking about, look at that guy, look at the faces they have, look at how there's cinematic shorthand, and I miss that.
Right.
But, the world is a different place, and there are more jobs for more actors maybe than ever. People are different today. Lee Marvin is one of my favorite actors. And Lee Marvin is Lee Marvin because Lee Marvin lived life. He was in the war. He was wounded. He saw death. He killed. Well, you put that in front of a lens, the lens is going, this guy's more. He's deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And when I was talking about Charles McGraw, who happened to be in Narrow Margin in one of my commentaries, the Hitchcocks, and you put Charles McGraw in front of the lens and you see that he had been a boxer. He was a dance hall hoofer. He was an athlete. He served in the war. Mm-hmm. And you put that guy with that voice in front of the camera, and the camera's going, this guy's been around. There's life.
There's something different in the eyes.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. The camera will tell you a lot. It's a real truth teller.
You're saying that years and years of Timothée Chalamet's water polo practice isn't enough to give him the kind of gravity?
I'm not saying that specifically, but
No,
not for me, not yet.
I kid.
Yeah, I know you do.
Is there an aspect of filmmaking that is your favorite, Steve? Is it writing? What do where are you most comfortable? What do you love the most?
I'm kind of a jack of few trades. I like to write. I don't mind shooting. It depends. I mean, when we did Chopping Mall back in the 80s, I was the second unit director on that, and I had the time of my life, but I was young.
Did you blow up the head?
I was there, but I didn't personally shoot that sequence.
Great head explosion in Chopping Mall.
It's very Scanners-esque.
It's the second greatest head explosion in movie history. At least that's what everybody says.
Ooh, can I guess what your number one is?
It's what you just said.
Well, yeah, it's Scanners, obviously.
I disagree with both of you, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Because I have a soft spot for De Palma's Cassavetes head explosion.
That's my favorite.
That's good, too.
That's number one for me.
Although, to be fair, his head doesn't really explode.
His whole body explodes.
Yeah. Right, but his head kind of flies towards the ceiling. So I guess it's technically...
I'll take it.
The head doesn't explode.
I'll take it.
But getting just jumping back to answering your question, I really enjoyed shooting then. I still don't mind it. I don't know if I quite have the durability for it the way I did when I was younger. Editing, especially when you're doing documentaries or featurettes and stuff like that, that's writing. It's filmmaking, but it's also writing. It's not cut. It's you're telling a story in the editing. But also you have to be filmmaking savvy when you're doing editing, because I've said this to Bill and I said this to other editors I work with, and I'm guilty of it. We all have attention deficit disorder, that we live in the 21st century and we all have it. And so what happens is that you have to be aware of it. You don't have to cut it like you're, a monkey on caffeine and sugar and cocaine, but you have to keep it interesting. You have to keep it moving. The audience is just programmed by living in the 21st century to get bored. So filmmaking is a kind of a bouillabaisse. It's a stew of a lot of different things.
Let's move into the film, which we're going to tackle today. It's called Blast of Silence, 1961, written and directed by Alan Barron. Yeah, and
starring.
At noon, you make contact. The wind is cold as you approach the ferry, but the palms of your hands start to sweat. This is the first bad moment. There's always a few on every job when you're not alone. You can depend on yourself, no one else. You've learned the hard way. They all hate the gun they hire. When people look at you, baby boy Frankie Bono, they see death. Death across the counter.
Now, we don't typically do a kind of walk through the plot. We jump all over. But what I thought we could do is maybe talk about the plot a little bit, just in terms of, because it's very simple. Killer from Cleveland goes to New York to assassinate a prominent mafioso, buys a .38 pistol with a silencer from Ralphie, who may be the best thing in the movie. But while he's preparing to kill his mark, he runs into two friends from the orphanage, Petey and Petey's sister, Lori, whom Frank likes. Ralphie tries to shake down Frank, who then kills Ralphie. And then Frank tries to call off the assassination and just stop killing people altogether, which aggravates the mob. Frank decides to do what the mob wants and carry out his mission. He gets awkward with Lori, who just feels sorry for him. Frank kills his mark. The mob kills Frank. The end. That's the whole... I mean, it's just kind of remarkable how simple it is. But also, it has some nice twists and turns, and it has just enough... I really appreciate minimalist story structure, and I feel like Alan Barron did a really wonderful job of creating that here.
Yeah, well, I do. Yeah, I think it is fair to call this a narrative-driven film. I mean, it's certainly not plot driven in the sense that you are going beat by beat, action sequence to action sequence, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it seems like it's really about a tone, about an environment, about it steeping you in this vibe, for lack of a better word.
Well, I think it's about the character, right? Like, to me, it's first and foremost, it's about the main character, baby boy Frankie Bono from Cleveland. He says he himself calls himself a part of the upper 5%. He's in the 5% income bracket. And Barron is in the film playing the main character. It was supposed to be Peter Falk.
Yeah, they were pals.
They were pals. Peter Falk was going to do it for no money. And then he got an offer to work on the movie Murder, Inc., which you've probably seen, Steve.
Yeah, and I think he got nominated for an Oscar for that.
No kidding.
It was definitely good luck for Peter Falk. Maybe not good luck for Blast of Silence, because I think if Peter Falk had been in it, it would have been discovered sooner than it was. But the other thing I just wanted to throw in before we get into some of the deeper aspects of it is, the plot you described is about as everyday and as mundane as it's like an episode of any cop show.
Yeah, totally.
Because when you think of cop shows from, like, say, the 70s, they were all third person type storytelling. Blast of Silence could have been an episode of Naked City.
100%.
And somewhat coincidentally looks like an episode of the old Naked City TV show. It's as a guy who grew up in New York City, I love the use of locations, and we can talk maybe more about how Barron shot them.
Yeah,
we can talk about them now or just down the road, but it's sort of a tone poem. You use the word tone, and it's very odd because it has a narrator, and it's not for a first person narration. It's not a third person. It's a second person, which may be one of the one and only times I can think of when it was used in a piece of film storytelling.
Yeah. Second person narration. You don't really see it or hear it, I suppose. But I guess part of what I wanted to lead to with the whole narrative driven aspect of it is, do you guys think that the voiceover was an afterthought, or
it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The movie does a really great job of covering for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, Waldo Salt wrote it. For those who don't know, Waldo Salt is a very famous screenwriter. He wrote Midnight Cowboy, probably most famously, but he also wrote Coming Home, Serpico, 1973, The Day of the Locust, 1975, contributed to scripts like The Philadelphia Story, 1940, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, 1939. So he just had a long career in Hollywood, and he had been blacklisted.
Right.
And so he uses the name here, Mel Davenport. And ironically, his narration is read by Lionel Stander, who was also blacklisted.
Right.
And who said, and hey, boys, if you want to use my name in the credits, you got to pay me $500 more. So guess what? His name isn't in the credits.
Yeah. Lionel Stander is the voice of God in this movie. You could go down that street if you wanted to. But there are a ton of reasons why I like this picture. And I already talked about the locations as one of them. It's such a great time capsule of New York City.
Yeah, let's talk about let's get into the locations, the time.
All right, let's go there first.
Let's go there.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I guess, and we could put it to you because you were Steve, because you're such a kind of an expert about locations.
I'm a New Yorker. I know those streets.
Yeah, he's walked those streets many times.
But I mean, I believe the first kind of glance that we get of old baby boy is him stepping off a train in a Penn station that no longer exists, right?
Yeah, no, I used to have grandparents who lived in Philadelphia, so I knew that station, and it always seemed musty to me. It always seemed like it had sort of a kind of a cloud of dust in it. It was this huge, kind of gorgeous industrial space. And, it was destroyed, and I don't know that it deserved to survive, but you hate to see anything interesting go by the way of quote progress.
Right.
But like right out of the gate, the movie to me is a cousin to Kubrick's Killer's Kiss.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about.
Because Killer's Kiss starts
with Penn Station.
Penn Station as well.
I was literally checking that right now. I was like, I think it's the same place. I'm not sure.
It is the same place.
Okay.
And by the way, that would be an insanely great double bill, the two of those movies.
Yeah.
Because both of those movies are basically pure cinema movies. They're about behavior. They're about movement. They're about storytelling without dialogue. And the narration that they came up with, I remember reading, they said that the idea was the narration kind of holds the movie together. in a great way. But it's really an example of pure storytelling, as was Killer's Kiss.
It is. Well, we're going to get into the narration, but a lot of the film was shot in New York City with no permits. It's shot in 1959, 1960, over the course of about, I believe, 22 days.
Spread over 4 months.
Spread over those 4 months. So what could you tell us about some of the locations, Steve? Because I know, I only know about the last location mostly. I don't know about the different parts of New York City.
Well, let's go backwards first. That last location is down by Jamaica Bay, which is not too far from JFK Airport. And I have certain diatribal tropes that I throw on my friends. And one of them is there is no such thing as a bad, shitty location. Well, that's a shitty location and it's fantastic.
It looks great on film. I literally think it looks beautiful to me.
It does. And they filmed it during a hurricane.
Right? Yeah, Hurricane Donna.
And I was a kid. When they were shooting it, at one point I was walking home from school because they were closing school down because of the hurricane. I think I was really, really, really young. But the only thing that mars that sequence for me is they have to have a sound effect for wind. And the wind sound effect is the sound of Superman flying from the old Superman TV show. So it takes me out of it just a bit. But it's an extraordinary example of great shitty location and weather. That's one of my other things that I love. Shoot in snow, shoot during a rainstorm. Look at Seven Samurai. The reason why it rained is because it rained when they shot it. It was not by design. Kurosawa said, it rained that day. But it worked for the storytelling. So weather, cold is great if you can have it. And snow, bad locations. This movie has all of that in the climax. But the rest of it is there's a lot of stuff walking the streets in and around Rockefeller Center at Christmas time.
Yeah.
There's stuff in Harlem. There's stuff downtown. They're on the East River Drive, the FDR Drive. He was very smart where he could to shoot places where there was a lot on the lens. And I know I'm prejudiced, but New York's the greatest backlot in the world. Because wherever you stand, you point a camera in a direction, you're going to see all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
And there's one thing about the movie that's interesting when I was looking at it before we did this is there are a lot of shots of him walking sort of cross frame, like from camera right to camera left. And he's on the streets. And what they did is they had somebody in a car or a truck literally filming him as he's walking along. So it's a little flat. But because it's in motion and you have all this real life going by.
Yeah, because it's New York, it works.
Yeah, all those free extras. It's great. And then when he had the opportunity to give us depth, like down by the river, you would just see so much in the background. You got the 59th Street Bridge. Right. It's amazing to me he got away with it.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of guerrilla shooting style, and it actually kind of has a little bit of something to say about the different parts of town they're in. So for example, they're in Harlem, right? And you've got all these shots of people like looking directly into the camera, and it even
sort of accidentally, but still,
but even kind of like posting up against it, and you contrast that with him walking down, say, Fifth Avenue. And nobody could care less that there's a car with a camera there,
I think they're all Christmas shopping anyway.
Yeah. And also speaking to those scenes, I found it really interesting that the whole time Alan Barron or Frank, he's walking with his head straight the whole time. And part of those unearned extras or free extras rather, part of what's so interesting about them is they really are going about their daily lives, and it just puts this kind of a focus of mind or like this intention behind the character that I don't think you would have gotten if they had shut down the street and hired actors, hired extras. So
there'd be too much acting going on.
Exactly.
It definitely I think it does help build that tone of alienation. Again, going back to what you were talking about with tone, Colin, like there, a lot of the film is about loneliness and alienation and those visuals of him walking in the city. And probably of anybody, if we were to focus on any single person in New York City, it's being alone amongst thousands or millions. And it really helps the film in that sense visually.
Yeah, he's an outlier. He's from Cleveland. Literally, he's an outlier. And even though he's respectable, he's wearing a great coat, and he's wearing, like, I don't know if he was wearing a suit, but like a jacket and slacks and a hat.
Mm.
There was a whole thing about conformity in post-war America, that even if you didn't have any money, and this is true in England too, that you would wear a suit and a tie, that you were trying to look like maybe you were more than what you were. But also in the case of Alan Barron's character, he's sort of hiding in the conformity, but yet he's still an outlier. And so, and this is all cinematically done. This is not writing per se. This is the way he thought of the shots, the way he thought of the staging, the way he had to stage. It's using the vocabulary of silent filmmaking in a great way. And that's one of the things I really like about this movie. I mean, it's a noir where dialogue is maybe the least important component.
Right.
You know, some people call it a neo-noir because it's 60, 59, and 60. It's not like, you know, Double Indemnity, which is all hard-boiled, you know, clever, witty, dark repartee.
Right.
And so Barron is really getting back to the fundamentals of filmic storytelling. And we were talking about this before we started recording, and I just wanted to throw it out while I still remember it, is if you watch the movie without sound, and I actually watched it without sound when I was reviewing it.
Okay.
You look at the quality of the photography, which is really good.
It's excellent.
But it's not lit.
Yeah.
There's no lighting. So it feels like if you had a Brownie camera back in the day and you were taking black and white photographs on Fifth Ave and you were in Harlem by the river, you'd have the same kind of lighting. It's all natural light. And the guy who shot it was Merrill Brody.
Merrill Brody, yeah.
I don't really know his work, but
so he met Barron in kindergarten. They're childhood friends.
I know they're pals, yeah. But I don't know his work professionally that much. But the thing is, he was still using a light meter. He was still, you know, photographing it.
Yeah.
But he wasn't lighting it. And so...
Not the exteriors, yeah.
No, and the interiors, there were a few scenes on sets. But it has this kind of homemade quality, but it doesn't look amateurish.
No.
Well, because he knew when to pick his battles. I mean, you know, we're talking about those scenes where he's walking down the street and, you know, he's walking in front of all these Christmas displays. And in those moments, he knows that he can't, you know, either they can't afford the, you know, the crew or whatever it is. So he goes with contrast there. It's a shadowy Frank walking against these Christmas displays, and it's beautiful. But then when he's on the street with actual, you know, light from cars, things like that, he knows how to use that. It's, it's very impressive, as you say.
I was just going to throw in on top of that, which I agree with, is that his lens choices were good.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like the movie was probably shot with a 40 for the most part, which approximates, you know, real vision. But it's exposed well because you look at it, it's not ultra grainy. It's not like news footage. It's motion picture cinematic photography. Yeah. Because if you look at the Blu-ray and the 4K that are out now, and they have great elements to work with, which is really an important component. I'm not looking at like photography that was amateurishly shot where you have a lot of grain. It's really well shot, but it's not lit, which is even more impressive to me.
Yeah, which can be more difficult at times because you're not controlling the lighting. Yeah, I agree. Brody does an excellent job shooting the film. It's moody, it's subtle and tasteful. The compositions, and like you said, the lens choices are strong. Just to go into Brody a little bit, like I said, they met in kindergarten. He was an apprentice to Kurt Courant, who was a big German cinematographer who shot a lot of films internationally, working with people like Charlie Chaplin, Marcel Carné, and Jean Renoir. So he's no slouch, you know, the guy that he learned from. Even though Brody didn't shoot a lot of films, it seems like he knew what he was doing. And then Barron himself was a painter and a cartoonist before he decided to make films. So he clearly has an eye for the graphic and understands composition and how to put images together in a way that's interesting. Because a lot of people will shoot exteriors, they have no idea what to do with it, you know.
Right. Well, Brody also cut the thing. Going back to Brody, sorry. But he actually edited the thing
and produced it.
Right. So I mean, you talk about knowing what to do with the footage. I mean, maybe he knows. Okay, in about 5 frames, this thing's about to become overblown. And there you go.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. And he probably knew how to save some money because if he was cutting it.
Well, it also sounds like you had 2 guys with one mind in terms of one story and one project. The other thing I just wanted to throw in, because it crossed my mind while you were talking about influences, and having an art background. Movies used to be influenced by art. They were not. Today, movies are influenced by technology. I could go on a 20-minute tangent, which I won't, about movies today, but I think part of what makes older films endure, and part of what makes this movie endure for me, is it is influenced by life and art, not by technology.
Mm.
And you look at Kubrick's first major movie, Killer's Kiss, and that's still a B movie. You know, talk about being influenced by life and art. I mean, Kubrick was a still photographer who came into prominence photographing real people on the streets of New York City. And, you know, he was an artist first. And, you know, Kubrick obviously knew about technology. But the influence of art as opposed to technology in the storytelling is a palpable thing. And when you watch a movie like this, you know, Roger Ebert once said he preferred movies in black and white because they're more artful. This movie is artful.
Absolutely.
Even though it was a movie that was in many ways kind of grabbed. It's not staged, it's grabbed. Barron has an idea on how he wants to do it. And then it's like, well, let's see what happens. Which is, I think, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, the movie's also punctuated hourly by Meyer Kupferman's really interesting jazz score, and I just think it's actually beautiful. But you do, you know, kind of get the sense that this could have been two different films, you know, going back to the narration, noting that they kind of shot this thing over a four-month span. I wonder, and I guess this is a bit of a pivot, but I wonder if this was never really meant to be a Christmas movie, you know?
Interesting.
I mean, because ultimately, you know, every reference to Christmas comes through the voiceover, and I kind of just get the sense they're like, well, we got to shoot in December, and we're not going to do anything about those window displays, and you know, and honestly, the theme, you know, or the kind of the things that Christmas evokes suit the themes of this movie anyway. So it's like, why not run with it?
It's a good point. Yeah.
It's a great point, and it's a great contrast.
Right.
And I suspect, I have no proof of this, that they backed into it. Because here's this guy, this outlier, literally,
right,
in a town during a season when it's about happiness and joy and family and belonging and being a part of something.
Yep.
He's a part of nothing. He has nothing. So if it was intentional, that just makes Alan Barron that much smarter.
Right.
If it's not intentional, sometimes you just get lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like he backed into Hurricane Donna at the end.
Right.
Which is, you know, brilliant. So he's sort of a kindred spirit of Larry Cohen, who was himself great at stealing things in New York City.
Yeah, Larry was one of the great thieves. He was eluding unions left and right. He would lie about where they were shooting one day in the hopes that the unions would go to that bogus location and shut him down. But I think that locations are a form of character. There is one of my favorite TV shows, for all the New Yorkness, but it's also a good show, is the original The Equalizer, which shot in New York and shot interiors in New York.
Edward Woodward?
Yeah, Edward Woodward. It was totally based in New York. And there is an episode, and I won't go into the specifics, but it takes place in New Jersey. Good story, interesting story. But I said to a friend of mine who was a big fan, I said, yeah, you know, it would have been better if they had kept it in Manhattan because Batman left Gotham. And the whole idea is that the city and the characters are linked.
They're tied together.
You know, I'm trying to the fourth Dirty Harry movie, Sudden Impact, which has got that great opening teaser that everybody knows about it. Come on, make my day. You know, go ahead and make my day. But Dirty Harry leaves San Francisco. And I said, they did a movie where Batman left Gotham. There is a power of locations as they relate to characters that sometimes is only felt by the audience. But it's a very important component. Like in more modern terms, the Bosch TV series. I've lived in Los Angeles for a long time, and I've watched a lot of stuff filmed in Los Angeles. Bosch was the first show shot in LA, which really used LA in a way to, I mean, one, LA has never looked better or more interesting or more, you know, variable as a city, because LA doesn't have a singular kind of architectural character like New York or London or Paris or Chicago, whatever. But LA is a component of the storytelling of Bosch, that you couldn't shoot the show in Canada. You couldn't shoot the show in Atlanta.
Right.
You couldn't shoot the show anywhere else. Bosch is LA, and LA is omnipresent. And so in this movie, Barron is using New York as a form of commentary, like anything else. Bill had mentioned the idea of, you can be the most lonely person in the world in a city of 8 million people. And Barron understood that, I think, internally.
Right.
And whether he really was going out of his way to sell that, I don't know. But sometimes there are great happy accidents in filmmaking.
100%. Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the actors. What did you guys think of Molly McCarthy as Laurie?
Well, I thought she brought a warmth to the thing that I was not expecting, and which is actually entirely necessary because, obviously this thing is so, some people call it nihilistic. I think that might be a bit extreme, but it is fatalistic one way or another.
Yeah.
And, he's got this interior monologue and it keeps saying danger,
Yeah. Watch out.
watch out. And I think, that's the danger that this film is alluding to. And it's not the danger of, some guy's going to mean mug you while you light a cigarette. No, it's the danger is you're going to be vulnerable at some point and you're going to let your guard down.
Right.
And you need some foil to do that. And this film chose the right actress for the job, I think.
She's fantastic. She's very much girl next door.
Right.
She's not Hollywood glamour. She's like, she could be sophisticated. She's beautiful, but she's also very down to earth. I thought she fit the role really well nicely.
There are two things about her. One, I remember her as the mom in Flamingo Kid.
Okay.
And I don't think I had ever seen her before, but to your mutual points, I think what she brings is warmth.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cold movie.
Yeah.
This is a hard gray movie and a hard gray time of year. And here she shows up and she is warmth and light and she's accessible.
Yeah.
The whole idea is that this guy survives because he's not a part of anything, which I don't know, maybe Michael Mann was taking a little of that for Robert De Niro.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I thought about Heat so much with this film. Yeah.
And so his hooking up with her and maybe becoming a little more human is kind of almost his downfall, which is really tragic and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only time he really kind of loses his composure in the film is when she's kind of probing him on his past. And, we find out that he just narrowly missed out on that awesome opportunity to be the manager of a parking lot in Cleveland. I mean, but I mean, that aside, she's kind of like, well, what did you do? And he says, well, what did I always do? I survived, and it's, you don't ever see any kind of emotion from Frank, or baby boy, I guess, if we're going to call him that, in any other way, because she brings that out in him, and because she's got this genuine aspect that you're talking about. And we don't see that from anyone else even in his what is his orphanage friend who is her brother,
Petey, yeah,
Petey. I mean, even he's got kind of a hucksterism about him, I guess. But
he's become it sounds like he's become kind of one of the madmen. Like he's become some kind of marketing guy, and he's done well for himself in New York. Right. So automatically, Frank feels a little bit kind of estranged from him as well.
One other point I wanted to make about her is that she's trying to connect with him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's connected to nothing.
Right.
She sees him. That's the thing about Laurie. She sees him.
He exists. He's a ghost in the world. Like, again, the world of conformity. You can hide in plain sight.
Yeah. Right.
And so she's trying to connect with him on a human level.
Yeah.
And he's bristling at that. Like it's like she's poking at him. And it's almost painful.
Because she can tell what he needs. She can tell that he's totally alienated from everybody around him. Right. She sees the big hole that has become his life.
Well, and it's the only moment in the film, or moments in the film, where he doesn't feel like a professional. You know, because throughout the rest of the film, you see this competence, or at least this hitman competence,
Right.
which absolutely goes out the window in those scenes. And that's really interesting contrast. I also wanted to point out about her that she's the principal in Over the Edge, which is a movie that no one talks about and we have to do on this show.
We'll do Over the Edge. And guess what? I've never seen it.
Oh, my God.
And it's Jonathan Kaplan.
Cannot wait for you to see it.
Let's watch it. Matt Dillon. Yeah. Heck yeah. Have you seen Over the Edge?
I have not.
You haven't? Oh, okay.
You guys are going to love it.
I was kind of not a Matt Dillon fan back in the day. I thought he was a little bit of a punk, but now that I'm older, I appreciate Matt Dillon as, he's an interesting actor.
Well, he's playing a little punk in that film, and it totally works.
He excels at playing punks, let's face it.
Yeah.
And he has a connection to Molly, in that he was in The Flamingo Kid. That was the movie that kind of won me over with him.
Okay.
It's a real, by the way, very under heralded movie. I think it's appreciated by people who have seen it. I'm not entirely sure people know about it as much as they should. It's great slice of life movie.
Nice.
All right. Well, I don't think we can go much longer without talking about Larry Tucker as Big Ralph, Ralphie. According to Barron, he had never acted before this film.
Wow.
Tell me what you guys think about him. There's a few things that we'll also talk about him outside of the film.
Well, he just seems like he's from another planet. He's just so.
But it's real.
Well,
I believe it.
Well, there's a thing that happens to me sometimes when I see an actor for the first time, and if it's working, I usually will go, "Who is this guy?" and he has that. And the other thing is, because he's overweight and he's sloppy and he's basically the visualization of the word sloth.
Yeah.
He is so in contrast to Alan Barron, but he's still alive. He's alive on the planet, even though his planet is dirty, grimy, and filthy and awful. And so he's a great contrast, and what a great discovery. And he was Paul Mazursky's writing partner.
That's right. They wrote Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice and were nominated for an Oscar for it.
Yeah, and I remember noticing him as Mazursky's partner back in the day. You'd see pictures of them together, and boy, talk about a Mutt and Jeff kind of combo. And I didn't really know he was an actor in any way. So when I saw that, I was very surprised. And he's really, really good.
When I first saw it, where I recognized him from was Sam Fuller's Shock Corridor. So that's where I first saw him. And then he sticks out. I mean, he's a very large man, but he's also a very interesting screen presence. So when he showed up in Blast of Silence, when I saw it several years back, it was nice to see him again. And I always enjoy him on screen.
Yeah, they're not trying to paint him in any kind of other brush than grotesque. And, he's literally comes to the, I think the first shot you see of him, there's literally like a sandwich hanging out of his mouth.
He's got a sandwich and it's a high angle shot through the door, and it's a slow. What's interesting is this is one of the few times in the film where Barron gives somebody a slow dolly into the character. And he just stands there and he stares at Alan Barron, at Frankie for a while. And he's like, "Oh yeah, Frankie." And he realizes who he is. He invites him in, but it's like several seconds of just waiting by the door for this guy to realize who he's looking at.
Right.
And it's such a good moment. It's one of the best moments in the movie for me.
And I think the dolly move helps give him a really good entrance too.
100%.
You're always looking for that when you're making any kind of story.
Well, because it also kind of underlies like this menace that the guy has. Because at first you kind of write him off as like, he's this slob.
Yeah.
He's kind of this character.
Pet rats.
But as the film goes on, you kind of realize that, he's got some pull and maybe he's kind of dangerous.
He's dangerous.
So that dolly shot absolutely serves that. But also I think that his apartment might be I don't know if that's a set, but it's like the most well lit of all of the the scenes. So it was kind of interesting. It seems like they really wanted to give him a front and center place in this film.
He's also he's kind of a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
He is totally a wild card.
Frank is a guy who figures everything out, and it's all about planning and control and no room for improvisation or mistakes or accidents.
Right.
And then Larry Tucker's character is just he's the complete opposite.
Yeah, Ralphie. Ralphie says, "I don't go back on a deal," and then what does he do? He goes back on the deal.
He's a wild card, and even physically, I don't know if Alan Barron is vain or not, but you see him without a shirt on, you say, well, this guy's in really good shape. He's built to be an actor. I don't think facially the camera finds him that compelling, so he wasn't going to be a star. But he had the equipment to be a sort of leading man type actor. And then you see Ralphie, and he's a mess.
Yeah.
Everything is a mess. Everything is of the moment. I'll change my mind. It's a fantastic contrast, and the sort of the fight they have is kind of
it's excellent,
ugly, and
it's so great because he comes at him with a fireman's axe, and Ralphie holds him off with one hand while he's punching him in the face repeatedly, and he's just holding him there.
Yeah,
and you get the sense like, this guy's almost indestructible, and Alan's lucky he has an axe, because I think this guy would throw him out the window.
Yeah.
Obviously, what is he also steeped in his apartment? He's surrounded by a whole cast of characters.
Yeah. He's like the original Ratatouille. I mean, he's just got all of these little critters.
Well, not just any rats, but sewer rats.
Sewer rats. And the other thing is physically, and I don't... It's interesting when you see such a large man that you get the sense that they can move. Because like when Ralphie gets up from the bed and he throws Alan Barron around and stuff, there's a physicality there that's really magnetic. And he feels like one of those things that you punch, that I guess they're usually clowns, and you punch them and then they come back up.
Right.
Ralphie feels like that. Like you can push him any way and he'll just roll back up.
Right.
And he'll just come at you. There's something very charged about him in that scene.
Absolutely. Well, and he's kind of always lurking too. At some point, Frank ends up at a jazz club in Greenwich Village, I think. And
yes, it was the Village.
Okay. Yeah. And Ralphie just kind of skulking in the background there.
Yeah.
Follows him into the bathroom. I mean, he's just kind of this presence, and I guess that's this movie's filled with those, but I have to imagine that he's meant to evoke something or be an allegory for something.
Well, and the other thing is, the way they use jazz and jazz clubs. I mean, before the hippies took over pop culture, the beatniks were the outlier social group, and they had their own music. Jazz was their music. And down in the Village, or Greenwich Village officially for non-New Yorkers, that's where you would go to jazz clubs. And I think one of the clubs they go to was a legit club.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was it the Village Beat or something? I don't really remember.
That bongo player seems like no joke. Like
he was probably really legit. But the thing is, again, if you weren't a conformist, and the 60s, the 50s, the post-war years in America were about conformity and comfort and routine and building. After the war, it was all about destroying. It was about building. But there's always going to be a group of people that sort of want to bend away from the mainstream. And that's what beatniks were in the late 50s and the 60s. And like I said, jazz was their music.
Yeah.
So there's Ralphie in a jazz club.
Yeah.
Again, he's not part of the mainstream.
Right.
He's grotesquely, to use your word, not part of the mainstream.
Ralphie and Frank are both of that club, so they're both outliers.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, to what you're saying, did you guys pay attention to the lyrics that
I'm wearing black all the time?
I mean, it's the most emo beatnik jazz crooner I've ever heard. But it's great. It's also fantastic.
No, I mean, it was painful to listen to, and at the same time, I just couldn't help but smile, because it was, I don't know, it was fun to listen to him tell his story about the woman that's making him wear black all the time. He's so depressed.
Yeah,
he'd be a goth or an emo or something.
Yeah, he would. Yeah,
which is perfectly metaphoric for the movie.
Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah, it totally fits that moment.
So, the narration, guys, let's go into Waldo Salt and what he did. Because I think, it's added to give the film greater cohesiveness. It's obvious. I mean, in my opinion, from my taste, it's a little too on the nose at times. But that was also one of the styles of that time. And of film noir or crime films, they would say exactly what they want the audience to understand in that moment all the time. And you are going to understand this thing. And that's done at times with this. It's well written, there's nothing wrong with the writing. It just feels like a bit on the nose. Sometimes I feel like it takes away from the film. Sometimes, especially when there's too much of it, but sometimes it adds, and it actually enhances great moments and it creates great moments. What did you guys think of Lionel Stander's narration?
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that it sounds like he swallowed a bottle brush, which is amazing, by the way, his voice is incredible.
It is.
You mentioned it potentially being a little bit on the nose, and there are ways where I might be inclined to agree, except for what Steve mentioned, which was that it's a second person voiceover, so it's really as if another person lives inside Frank, and that dynamic is really fascinating to me. I don't know how you feel about it.
I'd read some stuff where this movie's been accused of being somewhat pretentious, and I think maybe it comes from that. But for me, what works best about it is it just makes this movie this movie.
Right.
This movie is about an outlier, and this movie is an outlier with other genres.
Right.
And even within the same neo-noir universe, that narration with that voice, and by the way, I always think that Lionel Stander sounds like a guy who gargles with gravel.
Yeah.
And so it's such a unique voice, and it's so different that it goes to the DNA of the movie itself.
Yeah.
I mean, to your mutual points, it might be a bit much from time to time. It might be a little too literary. This movie is not, to me, this is a gutter movie. This is a movie that comes from the gutter and your guts.
Right.
This is not an intellectualized story. And so Salt has a tendency to go in that direction, but it doesn't really bother me, because even when Stander is narrating, Frank is on the move. We're looking at these locations. There's just this sort of forward propulsion of the story. So it's all part and parcel for me.
You already know one thing. You can't make the kill at his house. Too easily spotted. 24-hour street lamps. It's a laugh. You could afford a house like that if you wanted it. You're in the upper 5% income bracket. Killing pays well for a reason. You have the experience and the know-how. You're proud of your reputation. Expert and thorough.
And I think it frames certain individual scenes particularly well in ways that we might want. For instance, he's at that party with PD and Lori, is it Lori? And, what's the first thing that you hear the voiceover say to him? It says, "Yeah, hate parties." And we wouldn't, and obviously maybe it should just go without saying, but I don't know. He does decide to go. Maybe he is a social guy when he's not murking people. So we don't know. And that's actually some kind of a little bit of emotional background I want. Also just take the first, literally the first images we have of this are a train flying out of a tunnel, and he makes an analogy to a birth. And, maybe you would have put that together, but I'm happy for the voiceover to spell that out for me in that instance.
Okay.
The you hate parties thing is his way of saying he is not a social animal.
Right.
I mean,
he doesn't feel at home there.
If you go to a party, I mean, I like going to parties. In fact, I like going, especially when I was young, when we would just smoke and drink and talk. Now people have parties and you have to do stuff. Well, no. What's wrong with smoking? Well, I don't smoke anymore. I still drink. But, the whole idea of connecting. This is a movie about connecting and disconnecting or not connecting.
Right.
And so that you hate parties was great shorthand, I think.
Yeah.
To sort of, just hammer that idea home. I mean, it does help the connectivity of the storytelling, I think,
it does.
The narration.
It helps the connectivity of the tone also, to your point. It really brings the tone of the film together. But I do want to go over, I want to give you some lines that I thought don't work. And then I want to give you some lines that I think do work.
Please do.
So it doesn't work for me that watch it, Frankie. Every time if he did it once, maybe it would work for me. But the 10 times or whatever that it happens in the film, probably less.
Well, also Lionel Stander might be selling it a little too much.
He's selling it hard. Yeah. If you watch it, Frankie, that might have, if he had given a little variation to that, might have helped me. Another one is, when people look at you, baby boy, Frankie Bono, they see death across the counter. And it's like, oh, two on the nose. We're going to learn this about Frankie. We're going to understand it about Frank. We don't need you to tell us that. Good narration example. You don't have to know a man to live with him, but you have to know a man like a brother to kill him. That's great narration.
Sure.
That was a great line.
Yeah, that takes you down whole bunch of different things to think about.
Yeah, it gives a great amount of characterization to Frank in 2 lines or 1 line.
Well, I thought for sure you'd mention it as one that wasn't particularly good, although I actually think it's interesting. He says he's a second-string syndicate boss with too much ambition and a mustache to hide the fact that he has lips like a woman.
That's great.
And then he follows it with the kind of face you hate. It's
Right.
like, wow, all right.
Right.
Which I just took to my...
That's just good pulp.
That's right.
You know,
That is
again,
good pulp.
Lionel Standard may be selling it a bit hard,
Yeah.
but that's kind of good pulp.
Yeah.
That is good pulp.
Like there's stuff like a killer who doesn't kill gets killed. You know, it's like, and yeah,
Right.
that could be really on the nose, but it's also just kind of flat. It's to the point. And
No, that one I think helps the movie.
Yeah.
And because it's thematic. It
Yeah.
goes along with the theme of the film.
Well, it's also sort of telling the audience, you know, it's positioning the audience for this world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the audience is smarter than any creator gives them credit for.
right.
But sometimes you need to just like steer things a little bit.
Right.
I remember there's this great quote. I think Hugh Grant was talking about doing 4 weddings and a funeral. And there was a scene where he is saying, "Why am I the guy who always goes to weddings but never gets married?" And that's fundamentally the overriding story of what that is. But there was value in his saying that. And I think there is value here in saying that. Sometimes you just,
Right.
you're not telling the audience what to think. You're just sort of steering them kind of a little more in your direction.
Right, right. Which probably was needed by the film. Well, and Barron's dialogue is good. Some of it's just fine, but some of it's quite good. But it's very realistic. It's very to the point. There may not be enough there without all of the narration to carry the film and to hold it together. And I guess that's what they thought at the time, and that's why they hired Waldo Salt.
Right. I mean, and you know, I guess it's when you discuss the narration being on the nose, there are lines where he says things like, you know, "You're alone, but you don't mind that. You're a loner." And it's like, yeah, of course we can glean that by literally seeing him be a loner over the course of 70 minutes. But the thing is, it also kind of calls attention to the fact that he's aware of it, you know, like, and so I don't mind that it's on the nose because it reminds me that he's got this interior monologue where he's reminding himself that he's always alone, that he's just a random face in the crowd.
Well, it also goes to something that we were talking about earlier about great stories versus genre and execution.
Right.
That's what makes this movie interesting, is that here is this story that is an existential story about an assassin,
right,
or about a hitman.
Right.
Yeah.
The assassin is almost too grand for what he is. He's a hitman.
He's a working man.
Working class hitman.
Yeah. And but again, the existential sort of, you know, glaze of it just positions this movie differently from everything else that we've seen.
Well, and to that point, I think that there are actually little details in the voiceover that kind of help distinguish him as not just some amateur. I mean, like, so there's like a line where he says, "If you want a woman, buy one in the dark, so she won't remember your face." You know, and it's like
that's great.
And that's like, yeah, I mean, it speaks to this acumen that he has, where he's kind of constantly thinking about how he's being perceived and seen. I suppose if you want to slip in and slip out and kill somebody, that's probably something you should be considering. So it does not bother me. I think it's a value add.
Invisibility is another component of this story.
Right.
It's really about that.
Yeah, and to be clear, like I've said, I think that the narration both hurts and helps.
Right.
I think it is a strength and a weakness, and I appreciate it overall. I think his plotting's terrific. Even though it's very simple, I think he does a good job, even just moment to moment, of showing the character doing things that keeps the audience's interest. For instance, he's not an amateur director, even though this is his first film. There's the part where he goes to Boniface's boat to get his gun that he's paid for. He's paid Ralphie for. And, you know, he's talking in narration about, like, does he know that Ralphie's dead? Does he care? Blah, blah, blah. And instead of just showing us him walking up to the boat and directly talking with him, which is something that you might see in like a Ray Dennis Steckler film, he walks. He sees a longshoreman or somebody, and the guy's like talking to him for a while, and then he points, and then he continues walking, and then he goes to the boat, and then the man comes out. There's a kind of understanding of rhythm and storytelling, visual storytelling, that he understands, which I appreciate, and makes sense that he eventually went on to be a very prolific television director.
Well, there's a thing to this movie. I remember when he first goes out to what looks like Queens, where the mob guy lives, and he's living in this sort of modern post-war development of homes.
Right.
Again, comfort, quiet, security, all of this sort of stuff that I think everybody craved after the war. And then the scene where he's following him into New York City, and it goes across the 59th Street Bridge. When my parents would drive me into the city, I knew that route. But what it showed, it's not just about following, it's just showing people going about their life. That even though he's going to kill this mob guy, this mob guy has kind of a life and a routine. And I'm going to go into the city and I'm going to go do this. And by the way, Manhattan is always referred to as the city by New Yorkers, especially if you grow up in the outer boroughs. They say, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm going into the city. So, but then they sort of visualize that, which is kind of nice. The route was accurate. Sometimes you'll see a movie and somebody's walking along Fifth Avenue, and the next thing you know, they're in Brooklyn. Or, all right, here's a great example: The 7-Ups, one of my favorite working class crime movies. If you ever do that movie, I expect to be asked to participate. But they're following these bad guys in the Bronx. And then all of a sudden they are in Brooklyn at a car wash. Pardon me. They go through the car wash, and when they come out on the other side, they're in Manhattan. So Barron doesn't really cheat. He's showing you the way it is, the way it works, the roots, the habits of these people. You never feel like you're watching created life. Right. You feel like you're watching real life, and the movie is very grounded in that, Now, part of it might have just been practicalities, might have it just have been like, this is how we shot it. A lot of times, we're sitting here, we're thinking of all of these creative reasons why something is done. And sometimes like, all right, we drive across the bridge, we're going to go down that way. You turn on East 61st Street, you go do, it's still great. Whether it's creatively designed or just pragmatically designed. So
and it maybe it speaks to something that you were talking about earlier as well, is where honestly the movies with the most kind of gravity are the ones where that backstory is fleshed out in advance, and it says to me that maybe they said, okay, well look, what is it Troiano?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does Troiano's day-to-day actually look like, and how can we convey that in realistic terms and not bullshit our audience? And I appreciate that.
Well, it sort of reminds me as you're saying it, I'm going, I wonder if Scorsese saw this movie back in the day. And, there's that great bit. He says, so Friday was for the wives and Saturday was for the mistresses.
Oh, right.
Or maybe it's the other way around. But like maybe Scorsese had that in mind because, he's coming from his home where his family is, going to see his mistress. So I think this movie also kind of subtly has probably gotten into the bloodstream of a lot of filmmakers that came, who might have come after Barron.
This one did influence him. In fact, I had read that part of the reason that it survived obscurity is that other countries would have film festivals and it would make its way into some of their kind of side screenings because Scorsese was starting to talk about it around the 70s.
From what I understand, it was the Munich Film Festival in 1990.
Okay.
It had been it had fallen into obscurity, and then when it came out in that festival again, it just got a lot of praise, and it kind of came back into the limelight.
Right. But I think that Scorsese did put this on a few radars.
Yeah, he might have put it on their radar.
What's kind of great though is that because Universal bought out the filmmakers, Universal got the negative, and Universal had the movie. So sometimes movies like this, if they come out with some distributor who maybe was in business back in the day for 6 months and he had a couple of flops, they'd be out of business. and then the elements would get lost. What's nice is that the elements were at Universal and preserved, which is why when you see the Blu-rays of the 4Ks, it looks so good.
Yeah.
Which thank you, God, or thank you, movie gods.
Yeah.
What happened was Barron, he was a cartoonist and illustrator. He worked on a few films, one being Cuban Rebel Girls. And that's one that his friend shot, the same guy who shot this film. Was it Brody?
Yeah.
So he got $2,800 together and they shot some test footage. And that helped him raise $18,000 more. So this is real. I mean, can you imagine? Like, you have to pay for the film, the processing, $18,000.
Yeah.
Like, insane.
Which doesn't sound like much in today's dollars, but it's actually was quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about $18,000 in a day where people go to work and they were making $75 a week.
Good point.
Maybe $100 a week.
Right.
There was a time when if you made $400 a week, you're making $20,000 a year. That was considered a great job. So at 60, this is still a pretty fair amount of money.
It's a fair amount of money, but for a film at that time, it was a pittance.
Yeah,
I mean,
of
for a studio, like, it was ridiculous. But he borrowed the camera equipment from Errol Flynn's final film, that one, Cuban Rebel Girls, on which Barron was an assistant director. And he shot around New York City without permits, like we talked about, shot by his friend, Merrill Brody. And he also produced it and edited it, as Colin pointed out. And the way that he got that equipment was he helped them smuggle that equipment out of Cuba when they made that film. And they said, look, if you can get it out of Cuba, we'll let you borrow the equipment. So that's what he did.
By the way, I got to make this bad joke. Talk about guerrilla filmmaking.
Che Guevara would be very happy with that comment.
No kidding.
So then he got friends and family to work, probably behind the scenes, definitely on screen for free. And he almost got Peter Falk for free, wound up doing it himself for free. And then he sold the film outright to Universal for $50,000 in perpetuity. So he kind of sold it away, and that was it. That was the last time he saw it.
But he had a hell of a payday by the standards of the day.
True.
But,
and he got a career out of it, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he made a few more films, and then he just did a ton of television, some of which, like, the thing I always think of is Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Yes, I remember his credits on The Night Stalker, yeah.
Well, and I just want to kind of point out his clear dedication to this thing. I mean, and obviously, so, we've talked about how long it took to make, even though not so many days shooting, but also, I mean, that really is Barron jumping into that drainage ditch at the end of this film.
Yeah.
And
one take.
And you have to imagine if he's doing that in front of the camera, like what he's doing behind the camera to get this thing done. And, and apparently it wasn't a very hard sale on Universal. Apparently they bought it pretty quickly.
That's great.
Well, that was also, you got to remember, that's back in the day where double features still existed. And the second feature on almost every double feature would be a B picture that either the studio would produce or acquire. And so he was kind of in the right place at the right time to sell that.
Right.
Although, strangely enough, you think of Universal, which was maybe the most old school Hollywood studio. You could say MGM, but MGM was decaying at the time. MGM never buy this. But you have a studio like Universal, which is backlot Universal, studio filmmaking. And this is the complete antithesis of that.
Yes.
But it's still crime. And Universal had a lot of success with B crime pictures.
Yeah.
But, the other thing I just want to throw in there is that New York was not a very filmmaker-friendly town at that time.
Okay.
That it wasn't until Mayor Lindsay came in where he said, we want Hollywood to come to our streets. I mean, a lot of times movies would shoot a week in New York and then back it up with stuff. Madigan, the great Don Siegel cop movie, which starts out at Park Avenue, 103rd Street, right by the tunnel where the trains go to Grand Central. You're just going, oh man, this is great. And it's positioned as this real gritty New York picture. But a big chunk of it was shot out in California, and a big chunk of it was on the back lot. And so, because they could have shot the whole movie in New York, but New York was really, it kind of worked against you. The fact that they shot Naked City completely in New York back in the late 50s and early 60s for television was sort of a big deal.
Right.
Okay.
But New York was believe it or not, the second-class citizen of the movie business. You know, this looks like a New York movie. It doesn't look like Hollywood.
Right.
This is a movie that isn't traditional looking. It's not Hollywood product that everybody was weaned on.
Right.
And not only in the theaters at the time, but on television.
Yeah.
I didn't see all those great movies that my dad did in the theater. I saw them on television, but it was still, he grew up with Hollywood. Hollywood was passed on to me. And then this movie shows up.
Yeah.
This movie is so different. And there were a few movies that were made at the time, crime movies, like based on the 87 Precinct books that were shot in New York, not nearly as well as this.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the titles off the top of my head, but I can't. But they were all New York productions, but they were some locations, mostly sets. And I'm going, what the hell? You know, you're in New York. You've got New York at that time. Why aren't you on the streets? And even when they shot on the streets, they didn't shoot it as well as Barron, and they had more money.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so again, this is another reason why this movie is special, because Barron really did everything he could within his power to take advantage of the greatest backlot in the world.
Well, we've already talked about one other filmmaker who was on the streets of New York making films on his own, Kubrick, around this time. Also, John Cassavetes' Shadows comes out in 1959. Really, really technically rough. I'm a massive Cassavetes lover, but that film is rough. It does not have the
gears don't always mesh perfectly on his movies.
Well, but particularly Shadows is, you know, they were clearly learning a lot when they were making that movie, which is fine. But it's just funny to see how, you know, Alan Barron just made a very professional, even though it's not Hollywood, it's a very professional, competently made
the word
film.
I would use? Crafted.
Yeah.
This movie is crafted considering how little it has going for it in terms of budget.
You're right.
Yeah.
And way too tightly scripted to feel like Cassavetes, you know?
Yeah. There's narrative.
Right.
So the Universal released this film on June 5th in Chicago, December 29th in New York City in 1961. But again, it fell into obscurity until the film festival circuit that Colin was talking about.
And that film festival, and you know, if anyone gets a chance to check this out on the Criterion disc, please do, because they sent out a German film crew to kind of follow Barron around.
Oh, cool!
And just to all of these different locations. I think that'd really be up your alley, Steve. Is just this.
Oh yeah.
They just take this trip back through history and look at all these locations, and it's just kind of him giving you the emotional background for why they chose all these different parts of New York. Anyway, it's a pretty great feature.
Cool. Steve, what do you think of the sound design of the film? Now, you already talked a little bit about the wind at the end sounding like Superman flying.
Yeah, that unfortunately, if it has one chink in the armor, that's it for me.
Yeah.
Sound in this movie is not overly important. I think they do enough in terms of post where they don't have location sound all the time, but it didn't feel like Kubrick's movie Killer's Kiss, where the sound is all added in post. Like the sound effects of the city are almost like too present, and then when the dialogue is on, it's sort of flat. And it to me, it works not in harmony. It works almost a little bit against itself. In this movie, the sound never bothered me. It never sounded like a cheap movie.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if they just backed into it. They got a pretty decent sound job when they mixed.
Yeah.
I know there's a company credit at the end called Film Sounds. And you say, how do you know that, Steve? Well, Film Sounds was a New York sound effects company. And there was a TV show that was made about 5 or 6 years later called NYPD. With Jack Warden and Frank Converse and Robert Hooks. Was a 2-season cop show in New York. Lots of locations. You know, I was eating that up with a spoon even as a kid. And Film Sounds did their sound work too.
Is that Frank Converse of Moving On fame?
Yes, it is.
We worked on it. So in the documentary that Steve directed on Wings Hauser, Wings Hauser is briefly in an episode of this show called Moving On, which came during the whole trucker craze that you and I covered a little bit on the Convoy episode. Okay. And Moving On was part of that trucker craze. And Frank Converse is one of the, and I don't even know who that is, but I remember his name.
He was an interesting guy. He starred in a show, it was a summer replacement show called Coronet Blue.
Oh,
which was created by Larry Cohen.
We tied it all together, guys.
It was a show that CBS aired during the summer, and it was kind of a hit. It was sort of the Bourne Identity before the Bourne Identity. And I think CBS wanted to bring it back, and Converse had already signed to do NYPD, so they couldn't bring it back. And I think maybe that had nowadays when actors go out for a pilot, they have to sign a deal for 7 seasons. So just in case we want you, we know we have you. And I think when Converse did that back in the day, that was a little bit of an issue. But just getting back to the sound of the movie is that, sometimes New York movies, low budget New York movies they don't sound like real movies. They sound like New York movies. They don't have the finesse of a Hollywood mix and a Hollywood sound. This movie, that never bothered me. And as Bill would tell you, I'm Mr. Sound Effects. I'm nutty about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like they had a Foley budget to speak of. That being said, I would say that Kupferman's score is doing kind of a lot of heavy lifting in a good way. I mean, this is one of the first kind of cool jazz scores I can feel like a movie being used for a movie, especially, a lot of noir films, and I guess this would be maybe neo-noir, however you want to label it, they kind of tend to fall back into this big band sound. And this has this kind of a subtlety to it. So even when he's walking down Fifth Avenue and, there's not really a lot of natural sound from that. Just the score with him walking against those backdrops is kind of effective, but not too blaring and in your face. So I think there's a subtlety to it that really works, even though it's you can tell they don't have the big budget to go out and get every footfall on the concrete.
I feel like it's mixed mostly well. There's a little bit too much library in it for me, like you were talking about with the wind. But the only time I really have a problem with the sound is sometimes when Baron is actually talking because he mumbles. But other than that, it's good. It's fine. It's serviceable. It works for me.
Yeah, and it's of its time. That's the other thing. That, getting back to what you were talking about, Colin, with the score. The score really, grounds it in its time that when it was made. And one of the things that drives me nuts, and Bill has heard me prattle on about this, is that when people go back and they remix movies for stereo, but then they wind up doing new sound effects. And I remember the worst offender for me was, well, there are 2 worst offenders. But let's just say Dirty Harry, because I was shocked, because I'd seen that movie so many times. The sound of the movie was kind of baked into my consciousness.
Right.
And then I'm just going, all right, well, the Dirty Harry pistol sounds like the Dirty Harry pistol, but everything else sounds different. And that's a terrible thing, at least for me, because you have modern sound, older movie. And that for a while that was happening. I'm just glad that this movie sounds the way it sounds because it is of its time. What's great about this movie to me in many ways is it just represents the city in a certain way at a certain time. This movie is a time capsule movie on top of everything else.
Yes. Yeah. It is. I think you mentioned this earlier, Colin. I like how it begins with him coming out of darkness through this tunnel and into the light. And then at the end, he literally dies, and it's him going back to the darkness.
Right.
There's a lot of this. There's a lot of interesting visual or conceptual parallels, or sort of call and response happening for me in the film. Sometimes it's little details like, if you watch the cutting in the restaurant, there's a point where he takes a drink and then like Ralphie takes a drink. There's a part where somebody's laughing and then Ralphie's laughing, and it kind of keeps showing these parallels. There's a lot of, even though I guess it's craft, it's definitely storytelling, and I'm impressed with Baron on his first film already sort of grasping at things that help to sort of make the piece more powerful as a whole.
Well, you talked about the fact that he was a cartoonist, and I also worked in the comic book business for a very, very long time. And I remember once one of my gods, a guy named Joe Kubert, was telling me about what is good storytelling, because everybody would say, oh, storytelling this, storytelling that. And again, I was very young when I broke in. And he said, well, a good storytelling is if you can read the comic without reading the word balloons or the thought balloons. And so I think Barron, if he came from that world, had a real understanding of narrative through images, because this is a very imagistic movie.
Right.
You know, in many ways, and this is a compliment, Kubrick could have directed this movie. And Kubrick could have directed the movie we saw, not like do his take on it.
Right.
That's why I would love someday if somebody put this together with Killer's Kiss in a revival house, because I would love to see them both in the theater on the big screen to really just, like absorb all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're real cousins.
Yeah, they are.
Both of these guys said, well, I don't have a lot of anything, but I know where to put the camera. I know what to do with the lens.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, I remember some of those Night Stalkers you were talking about, Bill. And I remember his name because I'm a credits junkie, and they were well done. But I don't know that any of his TV work was as good as this.
Well, I wonder if any of his work was as good as this period, like, any of the subsequent films or anything. I mean, this is still the work that he's known for the most. And he worked in Hollywood and TV for a long time. Yeah. He had quite a career.
It's nice that he had a career. It's nice that because this is a portfolio piece movie.
Right. Yeah.
He's deciding, I want to be a director.
Yeah.
And was it James Cameron says, if you want to be a director, you should direct.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's also putting his money in it.
Right.
So it's just nice to see, instead of his apprenticing his way up towards directing, that he said, this is what I can do.
Right.
And I'm very happy that he had a good payday. Really, it seems like he gave the movie away, but at the time it was a good payday. But that also led to him having a career, which I'm also happy about.
Now, do we know if he ever performed again, or is this the last time?
I'm not aware of him performing anymore.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the camera was telling him, you're better behind it than in front of it.
We've talked a little bit about the themes, but I think we should talk about them some more. There's a number of things going on here. A lot of it has to do with, as we've said, loneliness, being alone amongst others, and what these things do to a man's psyche. He seems to feel trapped, and he's become this closed-off human being, because that's kind of what you have to do if you're a killer. It's self-preservation. It's a defense mechanism. But because he's done that, he's narrow-minded to the point of living this really pathetic, small life. And you said the line, Colin, that I think leads to some of this: a killer who doesn't kill gets killed. And this is how he lives his life. He's like one of those rats in Ralphie's cage. He doesn't have a lot going on mentally that enriches his life. And the first breath of fresh air is Petey, and then really Laurie. Like, this is like, it kind of like starts to open him up almost against his will. And he keeps saying things like, well, I know I shouldn't, but I went down and tried to talk to Laurie again, and da-da-da-da. And it very much does like echo, Neil McCauley in Heat, when he falls in love with Amy Brenneman, and he's like, you see the heat coming around the corner, you better be ready to leave in 30 seconds flat.
Right.
Sure.
And this guy, what's really sad is that she doesn't feel the same way. She's literally, and he realizes she just feels sorry for me. And that's crushing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, this movie's like about a guy whose background and vocation, but also circumstances, have led him to be so irretrievably lonely that he's girded himself against the possibility of any kind of connection. And she seems to recognize that right away. And ultimately, the narration tries to serve that at every moment. I mean, the final line in the film is, the scream is dead. There's no pain. You're home again, back in the cold, back in silence.
That's exactly what. Yeah, I wrote that same narration. That's such great narration to end the film. Frank doesn't want to be a killer anymore, but he's a man who can't escape his bad decisions.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, it's a story about a guy who creates rules for himself.
Yes.
And if he doesn't break his rules, he will survive. Except surviving in the world that he's created for himself
He's dying inside.
Yeah, he's basically sort of set his own fuse to get destroyed. Like,
Right.
well, if I do this, I'll be okay. I'll get away with it. And I'll still be a good killer and all this. And it's like, but I hate it. I hate me. I hate the world I live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But his outlier strategy is, if I don't connect with anybody, nobody can pollute the rules.
Right.
But yet, he's still a human being. He's not a machine. His reputation is that he's a machine. He's a killing machine.
Right.
And then he meets this woman, and he gets just a little taste of what it could be like to be a normal human being.
Yeah. It's like Frank isn't sociopath enough. He isn't sociopath enough to be a killer. He's actually quite human, and he realizes it only too late that he's gotten into the wrong business.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that he's oftentimes lost in his past. I mean, he keeps alluding to the orphanage. I mean, it's literally a visual out the side of the window.
Yep. With the nuns.
And he doesn't ignore that fact. It sends him into a deep reflection. And then, it's also clear that he's a victim of circumstance in that he never had a family. And the one kind of surrogate father that he did have, which was this guy who gave him a job at a parking lot, was killed or, came to a violent end. And then, it's very clear to Frank that he sees this man as a coward for running away from that situation. And it comes from a moment where he's, being vulnerable with like the one person he makes a human connection with in the film. So,
all right, I'm gonna walk down the street of pretentiousness here.
Do it.
But this is a movie.
That's our street.
This is a movie about the value of love. Even the mob guy,
right,
he goes from one environment of love, his family, to visit his mistress, which is another environment of love. And the whole idea of this movie, I mean, you talk about it was so nihilistic. Is it really? Is this really just this weird argument for reaching out to people, connecting with people, maybe finding love wherever it's available?
Yes.
And so again, when I as I say this and you're saying yes, I'm going, we're talking about a fucking crime movie here.
You're exactly right, Steve. That's exactly what
makes it. That's what makes it more than just a crime movie.
Right.
There's no pretension there at all. In fact, it's the only time that he ever moralizes about killing Triano, yeah. The only time that he ever discusses the ethics of it are when he brings up the fact that he's visiting his mistress at all. In a way, it's almost like he's given himself permission. Like, this is not a virtuous person. I can do this.
He's going to learn to hate him.
But yet he's happy when he's doing it.
Oh yeah.
He's enjoying his mistress.
Yeah.
Again, he's allowed himself to make the connection.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. And actually, there's a piece on the internet now where there's an interview by phone with Barron, who is somewhat notoriously cantankerous and curmudgeon-y. And he's talking about how cell phones are ruining our lives. And he's talking about how it is this connection through these devices is actually pushing us further apart from each other, which is not an uncommon argument, but I think it's particularly important when we're talking about this film, because it is very clear to me that Barron is somebody who values human connection, and that is what this movie is about, and that this movie is showing you this is what happens if you try to escape that, if you don't give yourself enough of humanity.
Yeah, and it's the one thing that can cause his downfall. So he's constantly, his inner monologue and his actual physical blocking is him going out of his way not to look people in the eye, which is, to your point, is a symptom that you see, all young people, and I realize this is a very shaking my fist at the cloud kind of statement, but I don't care. Like, sometimes you go to shake the hand of like a Gen Alpha person and they don't like look at you in the eye and they kind of like act like, what are you doing? And it's like, well, I'm trying to make a connection with you. And
right.
So anyway.
Well, and the crazy thing is, because I'm older than both of you guys, I mean, the whole idea of heading towards adulthood was the whole interaction on a daily basis. When I worked in the comics business, which is another story for another time, I was working with my heroes, and all I could think about doing was asking them all a zillion questions about work and craft and art and how you do things. In other words, have a conversation.
Right.
And conversation now in the world we live in is an act of maybe extreme intimacy.
Right.
And I go, what are you talking about? Or not talking about?
Right.
I remember going to a holiday dinner, and the 20-ish computer literate son of these people who were there and were talking. And I'm looking at this guy, and this is going to be incredibly uncharitable. And I'm listening to this guy, and I'm just going, this fucking kid is socially, and I'm going to say it, Bill, retarded.
Mm-hmm.
He is out to sea in a way, and I'm going, how does he survive?
Mm.
And then I realized it's not just this kid. This is sort of where our society is. A friend of mine says, you have no problem sitting outside, drinking a cup of coffee and talking to somebody for 2 hours. And I said, absolutely not. That's one of the joys you can have, especially if it's a nice day.
Right.
Is that the world we live in? Well, getting back to Frank in this movie, that kind of intimacy is something that was alien to him, yet he craved.
Right.
Yet, because the rules say, you connect, you open the door for danger. And so here's this little genre movie that this guy made back in the day, who was trying to do something maybe commercial his way to be a portfolio piece. And here we spent all this time talking about all the layers that are there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You watch movies today.
That's just wonderful.
And the narrative is the narrative. It's like, I had
and it's often a convoluted narrative. That was one of the things that I'm pointing out at the beginning is it's so simple, and yet he can hang so much stuff on it.
He's hanging all kinds of great fruit all over the place. But I just want to make this one point.
Yeah.
I had a realization the other day that if an action movie is not a superhero movie, it's a version of Mission Impossible. I don't dislike the Mission Impossible movies. I go see them in the theater and I enjoy them. But I'm literally watching a couple of action movies made by different filmmakers with different stars. And I said, this could have been a Mission Impossible movie. This could have been a Mission Impossible movie. The reason I bring it up is that all movies have to be like something else now more than ever because they can be sold and marketed.
Right.
Alan Barron's just going, this is the movie that's in my loins. And I'm going to find a way to get the money. And I'm going to find a way to get it made. And then I found a way to get it sold. And in a sense, again, maybe this is pretentious again, this movie, on many levels, should serve as an inspiration for people.
Yeah, and it's not like it's uncommercial. It's a
not at all
film,
uncommercial because
but it's also artistic.
But it's a genre movie. That's the smart part. In some of the screenwriting classes that I've taken over the years out here, genre is your friend.
Yes.
They always say, know genre, know how the genre works.
Right.
Because if you do that, then you take that as your foundation.
Right.
And then you decorate it from there with what you think personally about stuff like. And that's exactly what he did. He said, I'm going to make a crime movie.
Mm-hmm.
And in even in 59, when he's thinking, probably it's gestating, 15 years worth of genre crime movies and noir pictures that have come out since the end of
Not
the
to
war.
mention pre-noir, like all the crime movies from the 30s. And
Right.
Yeah.
But really post-war America was ready for these kinds of dark stories.
For sure.
Okay, so he's got 15 years of watching this stuff, and he said, okay, I'm going to tell that my way.
Yeah.
And he makes a movie about love and connection and rules and everyday life and conformity. And I can't believe I'm saying all this stuff, but because to your points, it's a very simple story.
Yeah.
But it has layers, whereas movies today don't have those layers.
It's a beautifully decorated Christmas tree.
It really is. And a Christmas movie.
Yeah. And an actual Christmas movie. People love to have these arguments about, it's Die Hard Christmas movie and all this. And it's like, whatever.
Absolutely.
We can go, and that's fine. but people will lose hours of their life arguing about this. Like, no, okay, that's fine. But this is actually, it's integral to the narrative because it absolutely flavors just how alone he is. It's like the time of year where you're constantly bombarded with family, friends, togetherness, solidarity. Nope, not old baby boy.
100%. And just to show us how messed up Frankie is toward the end, after he puts 6 bullets into Troiano and then kicks him over, he goes downstairs. He finally is able to get out of the building because the cleaning lady's cleaning the downstairs floor. He gets out through this other passageway and he goes around the corner and he gives a little money to a nun. Little touches like that, like yes,
Well, yeah,
yes,
I mean,
Alan Barron, yes.
buying off your guilt and trying to make amends.
That is such a that he must be like a Catholic hitman. I mean, that is so Catholic, it hurts.
Well, isn't he Italian? So there's
Yeah.
a strong possibility.
Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
This is a movie that packs so much into that. Was it 77 minutes? 70
Yeah.
minutes?
Yeah,
Tight.
77 minutes.
So, and I know that there's a big argument nowadays, and obviously attention spans are getting shorter because of the nature of media these days. And I'm all for a 4-hour film or a big epic, a big sweeping epic, but this really is a reminder how much punch you can pack within a very tight time frame.
You open up a door to a thing that I talk about a lot and I hammer, again, my friends with, is like, efficiency. Great movies are efficient.
Yes.
And you go, well, does that mean they're fast? No, it means they're efficient. And I'm going to go back into antique movie land. King Kong, which is pretty freaking antique by today's
1933?
standards.
Right.
Yeah, the original King Kong. That is a miracle of efficiency. That movie starts out, it tells you what's going to be, it gets in gear, it gets the island, she gets taken by Kong, they go after Kong, they go back to New York. There isn't a dead moment in that picture. Efficiency. Billy Wilder, who always used to say the worst sin of all is to be a bore or be boring.
Right.
And you look at his movies for the most part, not his really later movies, but his movies were efficient. Watch Double Indemnity one day. Man, there's no waste, no fat.
Yeah.
Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, Some Like It Hot, efficient storytelling.
Right.
There's a movie I've talked to Bill about that I think is great in terms of efficiency. And it's a good movie too. It's called Dogs of War with Christopher Walken. It's a mercenary movie based on a Frederick Forsyth novel. And you watch that, man, and it's like William Goldman, screenwriting 101. It's like come in late, leave early, just it's not fast, boom, to boom, to boom. It's not like editing or cutting. It's just efficient. This is all we need for this scene. Let's go to the next. And it's just the propellant quality in the narrative. And this movie has it as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And no movie has to be as long as it is. No story has to be that long. Ed Zwick, who I interviewed for my Wings Hauser doc. Plug. I went to a seminar once and he had the most brilliant thing I've ever heard about because he was writing television. He was doing 30-something around the time. And he just turns to everybody, and there are tons of would-be writers in the room, and he goes, it can always be shorter and funnier. And you go, that's a lesson.
Yeah.
That's a big lesson. You're talking about rewriting. It can always be shorter and funnier.
Yeah.
That's potent stuff. And one of the simplest sentences I've ever heard about writing. That, as storytellers, I think we have a tendency to want to get everything that's important to us in there.
Sure.
And the thing is, you don't have to do it.
Right.
Well, and
The audience will come in and help you.
yeah, and or they will fill in the blanks to suit their own needs, which is part of what makes some movies.
Well, then
so
they're
magical.
participants.
Yeah. But I mean, and you're totally right about the efficiency thing. And you mentioned Wilder. I think I was reading the great oral history of Hollywood. The Janine, I think it's Janine Basinger. Mm-hmm. She quotes Wilder where he's talking, I think, about a Chaplin movie. He talks about 3 shots. One is a guard hanging up a wanted poster of Charlie Chaplin, essentially. The next shot is a guy kind of getting out of a swimming hole, and he's like looking for his clothes, and he finds like a prison uniform instead. Next shot is Chaplin, and he's wearing like a minister's robe that's a little bit too long for him, So like you already have learned maybe 10 minutes worth of backstory about these guys, and maybe 5 seconds worth of shooting, and that's I feel like this movie has qualities like that where it's packing so much in, even when it's just being a little bit listful and meandering and just walking through a crowd. I think there's a lot there too.
I think what could have happened had this gone through the system, somebody would have said, well, why does he do that?
Yeah,
why does he do that? Why does he do that? When I wrote the screenplay for Against the Law with my friend Bob Sheridan, we always said, no exposition. We don't want to tell anybody why this is happening. We just want it to be happening.
Right.
And then there was this one note from a development exec. It says, well, why does the hero drink? Why is he an alcoholic? And I said, oh, fuck me. It's just, come on. But they said, no, we really need to know. Well, the answer is they didn't need to know.
Right.
But I couldn't say you don't need to know. So Bob and I left the meeting and we walked out. And Bob used to smoke and he'd light up and he turned to me and he says, you do it. And so I had to figure out how to do this exposition in a way that was going to work. And I hated the idea of it. But what I did is, circling back to the beginning of this podcast, talking about characters having lives before the movie.
Yeah.
I used that mindset. And I created this sort of reverse biography and came up with an incident that was a turning point for this cop who became kind of an apathetic cop. They talk about good cops, bad cops. This guy was an apathetic cop. And so the new partner was being told this story by the old partner who was the lieutenant. And I wrote the scene and I was lucky that great actors did it. And I was at a screening and a writer, a director, actor friend of mine was there. And he just turns around after that scene and he gave me a thumbs up. So the thumbs up scene was the scene I didn't want to write. And so sometimes you got to do it, but sometimes you have to figure out a way to do it where it's just like, well, this is why so-and-so does so-and-so. It's death. And that gets in the way of efficiency.
Those things in films or in any kind of motion picture, whatever, short or television, episodic, they're like seeing into rich blacks in an image. Not only do I not need to see everything, to see everything starts to destroy some of what my mind is doing with what is there. And I don't want to know everything. I want, like you said, Steve, to fill in blanks. I want to add my own mythology. I want to imagine the different possibilities of what might have happened before. And that's one of the things that bothers me about, Hollywood right now, where, anytime a successful movie has a moment like that in it, they're going to make a prequel that explores exactly what they were talking about. Right. We got to see that scene where Han Solo talked about the castle run with and it's like, no, we don't. I don't want you to show me that. I want to
the
have
fact that he talks about it was enough. It's like that stuff I was talking about, The Thing. Mention it, then let the audience
run
with it.
If you want to do a sequel or a prequel, do something else. Don't ruin the story that they were talking about. Do something else. Let the imagination of the audience, play with all of that stuff. It's so wonderful and it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
And cinematic storytelling, I know it sounds pretentious and everything like that, but when you get an opportunity to do it, and do it well. And really getting back to Baron, he does it so well, so often in this movie. It can take your breath away. Again, talking about that show, The Equalizer, which is in New York, it's related, it's a cousin, let's say. There's a moment where Edward Woodward has broken up with this woman who he loves. And they're at the skating rink in Central Park. She likes to ice skate. So the camera starts on her. And you're hearing the sort of goofball ice skating rink music going on. And then it starts on her and the camera pans over to Edward Woodward, who was not anywhere near the rink. And it goes into this piece of music, this brilliant Stuart Copeland music, which was his melancholy theme. And so he's heartbroken that she won't stay with him. And he starts walking away from the camera. And the camera just turns and pans away from him, widens out, and you see the city. And you go, that's Batman, that's Gotham. And no matter how much of a hero he is, he's always going to be alone. One shot, two pans, great music, amazing storytelling. I love it when it happens. It doesn't happen enough. And I'm not talking in television. I'm talking in movies too.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen enough, but when you can have it, boy, it resonates. I know. I remember I went, wow.
Yeah.
And this movie, just again, pulling it back, this movie had some wows in it for me the first time I saw it. I mean, I went, wow.
Yeah.
It's great when it happens.
Yeah, and it's becoming rare, as you alluded to.
Well, speaking of great storytelling, Steve, could you tell us a little bit more about Working Class Actor before we go?
Sure. Working Class Actor started out as a screening of Vice Squad. Some of my friends, a couple of my partners, producing partners on King Cohen, we would get together like once a month and we would screen not always the best movies. It was more genre, grindhouse, 42nd Street type stuff. And one of the guys who was there, good friend of mine, writer, producer, Cyrus Voris, had never seen Vice Squad. And he didn't really know, he hadn't noticed Wings Hauser. And he said, wow, I got to see more Wings Hauser movies because Wings Hauser explodes into the consciousness in Vice Squad. And then COVID hit.
Mm.
And so all of us were prisoners in our own homes and we're saying, well, what do we do and not get bored? And so we created this Wings Hauser sort of book club, film club, that we would watch something that he was in, get together on a Friday night after a Zoom.
Something? You would watch everything.
We wound up watching everything, but we would do it every Friday as a Zoom with alcohol. And it was at least a way to, again, to connect, getting back to the theme of Blast of Silence, connect with our pals.
Mm-hmm.
We did this for a year of COVID. Cy's wife said, he should know about this, that you idiots are doing this every week. And so she used to be an agent. She knew somebody who knew his manager. And we had a phone call with Wings, who somewhat trepidatiously is going, he knew that we weren't nuts. We might have been nuts, but we had bona fides. And he got on the phone. He was not overly technically savvy. And so it was a call to Cy, and Cy held up the phone to the microphone on his computer. And we talked to the guy for about an hour or so. And he was interesting and funny, articulate. A lot of the qualities Larry Cohen had. When I met Larry, I knew the career was interesting. What I found out was the man was interesting. And I was getting the same vibe off this. And my partner, Matt Verbois, said, is there a movie with this guy? And I said, I understand why you asked. I'd want to meet him again. We met him again at the Manhattan Beach Studios down in Manhattan Beach, Manhattan Beach.
El Segundo, yeah.
And it was still COVID and we had to meet outside and there were protocols and all this stuff. And so we meet this guy and he regales us for like another hour or so with all these interesting anecdotes. And afterwards, Matt, Dan McKeon, my other partner, and I said, maybe we should do a movie about this guy. And so I didn't want to do the same movie as I did with King Cohen. So it's really the story of an actor and the kind of career you can have artistically, pragmatically, emotionally. We use his career as kind of the spine, but it's really the story about what it's like to be an actor and have some success. And trust me, there are dark moments and it's not all rah, yay for Wings. But it shows you the kind of life you can have as an actor and get creative fulfillment from it, but can also be a tough life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who may not be that familiar with Wings, he was an actor who had not only a long career, but a very versatile career. He started off, I think, in soap operas, Young and the Restless. Like you said, he exploded with Vice Squad, which was this indie, grimy crime film by Gary Sherman. And then he went on
photographed by John Alcott, who's Stanley Kubrick's guy.
Yeah, pretty great. And then he went on to be in things like, Beverly Hills 90210 and Murder, She Wrote. And in the meantime, he was starring.
He was on China Beach. He was great on China Beach.
He was on China Beach. He was starring in these actioners that were straight to video. I mean, he has a really interesting career. Yeah, we'd recommend you check out Working Class Actor in 2025.
Well, I hope so, and I appreciate the plug.
Yeah, can't wait to see it.
You've already mentioned a number of films, so people could literally just go back and write down some of the ones you've already mentioned, Steve. But what are 3 films you've seen recently, old or new, that you'd suggest the audience check out? They don't have to be obscure. They don't have to be anything.
All right, one that really landed for me just a couple of weeks ago. I have a lifelong friend who lives out here in California. And we get together a few times a month and we watch stuff. And it's It is random. It's from everywhere. But I had picked up a 4K of The Long Good Friday.
Oh, beautiful.
And he had never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a 77-inch set. And I said, perfect. So I brought it over, and he's my pal who likes everything before 1975 or before Star Wars. He's a real old school Hollywood guy. So I'm going, well, I don't know. He might not like this. And he loved it. And what was great about it for me was, well, A, it looks sensational because they went to the camera elements, which is a big deal to me. But you go, what a great script. And it's the movie that unleashed Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren onto an unsuspecting world. When it came out in 1980, I was living in New York, and the opening day ad had this big headline on it, said, "The Gone with the Wind of the British crime movie." True.
Yeah.
And
Colin and I are Mirren fans, I think.
Well, I think that's Mirren at her, maybe at the top of her game, but also, man, what a smoke show.
Smart, sexy is the way I describe her in it. But here's the thing that's fascinating to me. The guy who wrote the script, I don't think ever sold another script. And if you watch that movie, I mean, first off, you just watch it for the experience, and it's fantastic. And it's got a couple of brilliant pieces of silent acting by Hoskins in it. I won't say anything more than that. And you just go, you watch this movie, and it was unbelievably well regarded. I don't know how successful it was, but as a movie, it was unbelievably well regarded. And this guy never wrote another screenplay. And I'm going, I think he was a teacher, and he just decided to write this. And it's brilliant.
I think that was Handmade Films. I think that's George Harrison's company.
Was involved. So that's one movie I saw recently that I really, really enjoyed.
Got two more?
I've been watching a lot of television. One thing that I watched that's worth showing, and it's weird because I hated the protagonist, was the Ripley series.
Okay.
Because it is so cinematic, and it's so about everything we've been talking about for the last 2 days here. and that really made an impression on me because the execution was so classic and so photographic. It was a show about images and touching on everything that we've talked about. And I hated the character, hated that guy, but yet it was so compelling in its execution. And it's all about everything we've just been talking about. That was great.
Yeah, well, Dakota Fanning actually, that made me think twice about her. I mean, obviously you think about her as a child actress, but she really steals the show on that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet.
It's really worthwhile. And let's get back to movies. Okay. I literally watched North by Northwest last night in 4K.
Okay.
There you go.
And that's my favorite Hitchcock movie. And it's still my favorite Hitchcock movie because in so many ways it's spectacularly good and entertaining, even though the story, if you think about it for more than 5 minutes,
doesn't make sense.
It's the most idiotic story ever. I mean, there's a kind of a MacGuffin, which is a Hitchcock term. It's a Cold War story. And one thing that's idiotic about it is they go to Rapid City, South Dakota, where they're going to get on a plane to go to the other side, meaning the other side of the Iron Curtain. Story starts in New York. Why don't you get on a plane in New York and fly over the Atlantic?
Because they got to go traipse across Mount Rushmore.
Well, they got to go to Chicago to get the MacGuffin, and then they got to go to Mount Rushmore because Hitchcock and
the man in Lincoln's
Ernest
nose.
Lehman wanted to do a scene on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
The movie completely falls apart in any logical way, but it is ragingly entertaining, witty, smart, great movie stars being great movie stars. It's sexy because people forget with Hitchcock, he was the master of suspense, but in the 50s, when he was working with movie stars, his stuff was really sexy. And
there's that great scene on the train with Eva Marie Saint.
Oh yeah, but
fantastic.
like in Rear Window, Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly, To Catch a Thief, Cary Grant and Grace Kelly. It just was a reminder to me that Hitchcock at the peak of his powers was a great storyteller, a great entertainer, and it had everything you go to the movies for. It had romance, it had suspense, and it had laughs, it had wit.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of wit very much anymore. And then he's got Cary Grant and James Mason to deliver it. So it's pretty great. So it was fun to watch that again.
Fantastic. Yeah, that and Vertigo are my favorite Hitchcock films.
Yeah, and
What's your favorite Hitchcock
You know
film,
how
Colin?
I feel about Vertigo. I
Oh
think
boy,
it's overrated.
we've got
It's
some.
all right.
We're opening some old wounds.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's all right. We don't have to agree on everything. We agree to disagree.
Well, I see that you brought a beautiful copy of Taking of Pelham. So clearly you're a man with refined taste, sir.
You know, if it's New York and it's anything remotely like a cop movie, well, here's the thing. My second favorite movie of all time after The Thing is The French Connection.
There you go.
And Pelham is way, way up there as well. Talk about writing. All right, we'll get back to writing. I know that's important to you, Bill. I met Peter Stone in New York back in the day. He was at a mystery writers conference, and my wife was a writer. And I don't like bothering people, but we're walking out of this place at the same time. There's Peter Stone, and I said, I was so great to listen to you tonight. I just want to say The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 is one of my all-time favorite movies. And he said, well, thanks. And then he goes, yeah, I put a little humor in it. and you go, a little humor, but in a sense, what he was doing is he was telling the story of everyday New Yorkers. And if you get in their way, they get pissed. And so that movie's not only exciting and smart, what a great idea, but it's just one of the most New York movies I've ever seen. And God, it's funny. It's still funny.
Yeah.
It's insane because that movie was made a half a century ago.
It aged well.
Yeah.
Steve,
it's great.
I want to thank you for spending time with us. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Blast of Silence before we go?
It should be seen.
It should be seen.
You
Colin?
know, and this has been fun. I've enjoyed myself.
Yeah, it's been great to get to know you. Yeah, no, I couldn't put it any better than that. It needs to be seen.
God moves in mysterious ways, they said. Maybe he is on your side the way it all worked out. Remembering other Christmases, wishing for something important, something special. And this is it, baby boy Frankie Bono. You're alone now, all alone. The scream is dead. There's no pain. You're home again. Back in the cold, black silence.
Thanks, guys. This episode, sound engineered by Colin Dixon, edited and mixed by William Budell, produced by William Budell and Colin Dixon, and original music composed by Michael Riola, and recorded at Bill's Hollywood Dell in beautiful Hollywood, California. If you'd like to contact us with comments, suggestions, or high praise, email us at cosmicmotionshow@gmail.com or send us a voice message at speakpipe.com/Cosmic Motion. You can find us on the socials at Cosmic Motion Show. Emails, messages, audio, or other media you send us may be featured on our program. Thanks to our audience for joining us. We look forward to sharing more thoughts with you on the next one. Until then, keep learning, growing, creating. Thanks for doing this with me, guys.
Yeah, thanks again. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.